Diego. On it, New Zealand was to line up with the fastest catamaran in the world. Race or mismatch, it would be the most extraordinary confrontation ever for yachting's greatest prize, the America's Cup. The first shots in this campaign were fired here at the San Diego Yacht Club a year before the New York court ruled for a race. Leading the attack was Michael Fay. Against him and holding the high ground were the burghers of this establishment. Their differences were fundamental. Fay wanted to race for the Cup. The Yacht Club didn't, at least not until a time and place of its own choosing, and that was far off in 1991. On July the 17th, 1987, Michael Fay came here to lunch with the officers of the club. They didn't know it then, but Fay had a different menu, and they were on it.
During lunch, I said to Fred Fry, the then Commodore, well, we are coming for the next Cup, Fred, that's definite, but we don't want to wait 4 years. In fact, I said, we want to race next year. And he said, well, you can't. And then I said also, well, I think I should tell you also that we're not really that keen on 12 meters for San Diego. We'd like to race a bigger boat. I said, in fact, I've got here for you a notice of challenge, a formal notice of challenge, Commodore, from the Mercury Bay Boating Club for a match next year in 90-foot boats.
My comment is unprintable, but the next comment I said is, that's very interesting, Michael. We'll have to see about that. And so we went into the club office and we sat down and he presented me the official letter and the dimensions of the yacht, and you could tell right away that this was going to be a very, very big boat and a very different situation.
It wasn't just the dimensions of the proposed Challenger that San Diego found indigestible, but that it had happened at all. Over the past 30 years, the Cup had been raced every 4 years or so. There was a cosy gentleman's agreement with the defending club calling the shots on the size of the boat and the rules for the regatta. Fay's challenge raised fundamental questions about the way the America's Cup game was being played, for whose benefit, and at the end of the day, who had the right to call the shots. Michael Fay and his partner David Rishwhite first caught the America's Cup bug in 1985 when they were asked to lend their forces to an ailing Kiwi challenge in Perth. They were a perfect choice for such a project. As owners and founders of their own international merchant bank, they represented a new breed of young, self-made Kiwi businessmen. Astute, ambitious and confident, they had a track record of investing in new ideas and backing them to the hilt. The Perth Challenge was a high-profile reflection of their proven commitment and a chance to stamp New Zealand's mark firmly on the America's Cup arena. It was a commitment that was to take them all the way to San Diego. The Kiwi Challenge was an outstanding first-time effort. Building in fiberglass rather than aluminium, their third boat, KZ7 or Kiwi Magic, became the boat to beat. Her performance in the heats was so effective that her legality was challenged by the Americans, who feared her superiority.
There's been 78 12 meters built all in aluminum, and so if you want to build a glass boat, why would you do it unless you wanted to cheat?
Whoa, whoa, I don't think he should have said that, but...
I'll take it all back.
I don't think you can, Dennis.
Connor's sideswipe was aimed to rattle the New Zealand campaign. This was fighting with the gloves off. In the heats, KZ7 won all but one of her 38 races. The only loss was to Connor. Then in the close-fought best-of-7 Challengers final, Connor with Stars and Stripes finally overcame Kiwi Magic by 4 races to 1. He then went on to defeat the Australians easily, regaining the Cup he had lost in 1983 after 132 years of unbroken supremacy by the Americans. Fay and the New Zealand crew, bloodied but unbowed, returned home to a hero's welcome. Everyone knew that their first Cup challenge had been very close to being victorious.
We went for the Cup, we hit the brick wall, we sat back and watched Connor take it, and I think deep down we knew maybe if we could do it again, maybe if we could have changed, it should have been there, it was there, and we slipped. So in that sense, I don't think any of us wanted to wait 4 years. And I don't think any of us wanted to accept the status quo in any way, shape or form. Every part of us was saying, well, why didn't we do it? Why were they better? Where do you go from here? How do you get that Cup?
After Perth, things had returned to normal. The Cup was back in the good old US of A. Honour had been satisfied and the America's Cup billion-dollar business was safely back home. San Diego sat back and wondered how the golden goose would lay the biggest eggs. The Sail America Foundation contracted to manage the defence of the Cup, and the San Diego Yacht Club almost immediately fell out over where and when the next regatta should be. But meanwhile, there were challengers growing impatient. None more so than Fay. Exasperated with the delays, he and lawyer Andrew Johns took a long, hard look at the 100-years-old deed of gift, which determines the way the Cup should be run.
And I think in that climate, Andrew's brain was starting to go into, well, hang on a minute, what is the real America's Cup? And I think he read the deed of gift. And in it, it's really just a rule book as to how you challenge. And it doesn't really have anything to do with what's been happening over the last half dozen challenges in the 60s and 70s. What it says is at 10 months' notice, a challenger can initiate a match.
Fay, determined to prove the potential KZ7 had shown in Perth, took her to Sardinia for the World Championship. Meanwhile, Andrew Johns headed for New York in confirmation of the validity of his idea.
Everything I learned in New York was positive. It supported our initial view that we didn't have to wait for San Diego to make a move, that we could challenge, and we weren't restricted to 12-metre yachts.
By the time KZ7 had won the 12-metre World Championship, a strategy had been hatched. Fay had his entrance, the waiting was over. The challenge would be exactly to the terms of the deed of gift drawn up by the last surviving owner of the schooner America, George Schuyler, for a race not in 1991 as proposed by San Diego, but 1988, 10 months after the challenge. Not in 12 metres, but in the biggest single-masted vessels allowable under the deed, 90 feet on the waterline. By mid-July, a design concept team consisting of internationally renowned naval architect Bruce Farr, his partner Russell Bowler, and sail designer Tom Schnackenberg were well down the line with their radical design. Freed from the old class restrictions, the project was a designer's dream, but not for San Diego, who, hoping it was nothing more than a nightmare, decided to ignore the whole thing, imagining it would go away.
I made 4 or 5 trips to San Diego looking for a meeting to discuss our challenge. But it became pretty obvious by August that we weren't going to get a meeting. Towards the end of August, we weren't even going to get a response. We weren't going to get a yes, we weren't going to get a no, we weren't going to get anything. So really then we had to face up to the choice. We were either going to go away and be bluffed out of the game, or we were going to have to pursue the challenge.
And pursue it he did. With no alternative left, Fay looked for a ruling on the legality of his challenge from the New York State Supreme Court, which holds jurisdiction over the deed. While waiting for that ruling, the decision to start building was taken. The deadline, just 24 weeks. As befits a radical and leading-edge design, the materials used in her construction were equally ahead of the game. Pre-impregnated carbon fibre laminates, culled from the programs of the aerospace industry, provided the strongest yet lightest possible hull. Into this hull, an aluminium chassis was bonded. In every other area, no expense was spared to provide maximum strength with a minimum of weight, so that this huge yacht, twice the size of a 12-metre, weighed no more than the smaller vessel. On the 25th of November, Judge Carmen Kiparik handed down her decision on the legality of the New Zealand challenge.
And I would like briefly to quote from her decision, where she says, "In the face of a properly tendered challenge, the San Diego Yacht Club
Must defend on the terms of that challenge or forfeit the cup. We have no intention of forfeiting this cup.
San Diego will not consent to other challengers under the terms, the strict terms of this challenge. If that somehow changes, perhaps we would. But currently speaking, no. The answer is no, capital N-O, no.
In January, Fay and his team returned to San Diego to sort out race details. High on their list of priorities was the confirmation that San Diego would meet their challenge in a similar boat.
if these guys, as a method of trying to knock the Kiwis off, want to turn around and say, well, all right, we are going to build that sort of boat and we are going to go race up there, then they have a risk, not us.
The technical consultants...
The day after they left, San Diego Yacht Club and Sail America announced their response to Fay's radical challenge.
We're building 2 boats. They're both multi-hulls. One of them is a catamaran.
It was an all-or-nothing response to the most incredible monohull the world had seen in more than 50 years. Early morning on March the 24th, the Challenger New Zealand slipped her moorings for her first sail on the Hauraki Gulf. The feelings of all those on board were summed up by the shore boss, Peter Wilson.
Everybody had been working pretty well flat out for about 30 hours. So going out to sea the very first time was a lovely, flat, calm morning. I just remember feeling an amazing sense of accomplishment. I was just smiling from ear to ear. I just couldn't help myself.
If one man was entitled to be happier than the rest that morning, it was Michael Fay, his dream slowly becoming a reality.
America is the largest economy in the world. It has the biggest aerospace industry. It has the largest community of yachtsmen. And New Zealand has laid down a challenge. New Zealand, the smallest country in the America's Cup community, has the resource, has the commitment, and the ability to put this boat in the water. We ask you, this boat deserves a match. This boat deserves a fair and even match. This boat deserves an America's Cup match.
The spirit of Kiwi magic, resting since the heady days of Fremantle, was definitely on the resurgence with the launch of the K-boat. Michael Fay's and David Richway's challenge, although privately funded, had captured the public imagination. History was in the making with this big boat, New Zealand. For the America's Cup community, here was a chance to take a look into the future of the Cup and what it could look like.
No, the big one.
While the campaign had finally hit the water, the war on the land stepped up a notch. Within the deed of gift is the statement that you sail a match for the America's Cup. Neither Michael Fay nor any of his team felt that San Diego's proposed catamaran constituted a proper response to their legal challenge. Quite simply, it smacked of finding any way out of meeting the K-boat with a like or similar craft. There'd be no similarity between Stars and Stripes and New Zealand. The likelihood of a mismatch was to drive the Kiwis back to the courtroom.
George Tompkins will bring you up to date with the New Zealand Challenger's present position on the monohull multi-hull issue.
Following up on the first question that was put to Michael last Saturday at the press conference at the dockyard, I think was, are you going back to court and when? And the answer to that is yes. And the when was this morning, New York time, 9 a.m.
Regardless of the legality of the catamaran, the campaign focus shifted to the big boat. New Zealand was a new experience for everyone, and there were just 3 weeks to iron out the initial problems before she left Auckland. The big boat incorporated many radical features, and each had to be tested. Would the revolutionary 150-foot carbon fibre mast be strong enough? The onboard computer systems had to be calibrated, and, most important of all, was the coordination of the crew. New Zealand was designed to carry 40, nearly 4 times as many men as a 12-metre. In the past 5 years, New Zealand sailors have won almost every major yachting event in the world. They return from all over the globe, drawn with the inevitability of moths to a flame for this challenge.
I was on my way back to Australia on a cruising boat at the time, yeah.
We'd been travelling around Europe for a few weeks doing Flying Dutchman regattas.
I was in Cowes for the Admiral's Cup at the time.
We were in Sardinia.
90-foot light displacement boat with a fully battened main just made my mind bogle.
It just looked fast, looked like a buzz.
They were back, all for the same reason. The ultimate challenge in the ultimate boat.
Three targets, most speed's 10.6. Speed's 10.2 and dropping, target of 9.8.
Okay, this is what we want pictures of. Get the hell out of here.
Freeze coming onto you now.
As well as the Kiwis, Faye sought specialist international expertise from previous Cup campaigners to help tackle the unique problems posed by the big boat.
Spire wants pictures of the boat from behind, showing the heel angle. At the same time, we put the wind speed, pictures of the sails from the bottom and stuff, so he can look, see how the boat's trimmed versus how much the boat's heel versus how much wind speed to figure out if we have the right sail area to displacement to righting moment, that kind of stuff.
On top of Davis's list of priorities was the efficient coordination of the crew on a deck the size of a tennis court.
Basically, we have one group that takes care of putting sails up, taking sails down, and trimming the sails. We have what we call the brain trust, or the speed team, which is in charge of figuring out how to make the boat go fast. And that includes the tactics and the actual depths that the sails are set at, and the style that the boat's sailed in. And then we have what we call the rail team, which really is just making up the human ballast, keeping the boat right side up.
Unlike a 12-metre, the big boat had no performance history to act as a guideline. Everything was being done for the first time, and time was a commodity in short supply.
See these little cracks that appeared on the first day in the bog down there? Yeah. They haven't got any better. You pull it up.
Yeah, that goes a long way. You want to push it down, don't you?
I know, I said it's in.
Is it?
Yeah, watercraft, we're going to go on the wind, tack, look at the mast on the other tack.
Oh, no. The main.
So we want, okay, so we want to spin quite fast.
I need counselling on a regular basis.
I didn't put that in, actually.
When we first sailed it, you put the mainsail up the first time and it looked huge, it just kept on going. But now it's come down to a manageable size and everything seems, quite normal to us. In fact, when you step on a maxi or a 12-metre now, they look, really small. So you definitely get used to the size of the boat.
I think it's sheer size. I don't have any idea of the speed we're doing. It's a bit like a top quality motor car. Until the chase boats came alongside, you don't really have the idea of going fast through the water.
With no comparable boat to trial against, KZ-1 literally had to race against herself. For this, the most advanced sailing computer system ever installed on a yacht was designed. One system constantly monitored the loads in the high-tech mast, rigging and hull.
Higher. Oh, 11.5. It just surged then. Yeah, that was nice.
A second system, using cameras at the top of the mast, measured the shapes of the sails in real time, telling the sail trimmers how efficiently the sails were set. A third recorded navigation and performance data. Responsible for the development of these systems was Richard Morris.
With our computer systems, we log 200 or 300 different variables on the boat's performance, from the strains in the hull to the shape of the sail to who's helming the boat to the rudder angle and all sorts of different variables in there. And so from your months of tuning, you have to break down all the numbers that you've generated, the numbers that you've learned, your optimum performance, and you have to represent those as usable targets on board.
Target 8-8. Reach holding at 10-6. Target of 10-2.
About 14 knots. 13 to 14.
Go high!
By the end of the third week, the shakedown was over. The big boat had shown her potential as a challenger and pointed the way to a new and exciting future for America's Cup racing.
The thing that this kind of yacht does is that it shows that there are no real horizons.
I think in all-round terms, it is unquestionably the fastest monohull sailing today.
Once you get used to it, it's pretty good, but it probably ruins you for the rest of yacht racing too.
What, on a scale of 1 to 10? Yeah. About 12.
Phase 1 of the challenge was over. While Michael Fay headed for New York and what everyone hoped would be the last appearance before Judge Kiparik, the big boat left her home waters, heading for San Diego, the home of the United States Navy's Pacific Fleet, the San Diego Yacht Club, and Dennis Conner. The day before the New York court hearing, Sail America unveiled the first of their defending catamarans, Stars and Stripes. Her superlight 60-foot hulls were built of carbon fibre, and she was topped off with a new dimension wing sail rig, the largest ever on a catamaran. Their second cat, against which this boat would trial, had a conventional soft-sailed rig. The fundamental differences between the Challenger and the Defender were plain to see, and the attention of the media was split between the boat and the politics of the race.
Mr. Fay thinks that he can impose his dimensions on the Defender, and the Defender, San Diego, are saying, sorry, the deed of gift rules. And we think the judge is going to say the same thing.
But I mean, originally San Diego did not go with the deed of gift rules because they didn't reply to New Zealand when they laid their challenges.
Well, San Diego did reply to the deed of gift, but you're right.
You couldn't have built a monohull in that time, this complex?
I don't know. We just didn't give that particularly a great deal of thought.
Well, it's pretty hard not to be excited about this.
So Michael Fay could have possibly done something exciting and good for America's Cup racing.
Well, I'd like to think that eventually that'll turn out for the best and that the couple benefit from it. Now that we're in it, what choice do we have?
I think this is largely going to be a design competition. And as I've said all along, I think one or the other of the boats probably will be quite a bit ahead of the other, but you never know.
On her first sail, the hard-wing Cat was timed at 18 knots in a mere 8 knots of wind. It was a convincing demonstration of the intrinsic speed differential that the catamaran would have if San Diego were allowed to race it against the K-boat. 3,000 miles away in New York, the Challenger's lawyer, George Tompkins, was putting that point to Judge Kiparik.
And the affidavits which you have before you tell you all the technical details of why that's so and why it makes the catamaran, no matter what size, smaller. A far superior boat as to speed. There is no contest, no match. At any wind, at any speed, in any waters. The keel yacht has no chance. The New Zealand left Auckland on May 13 on a container ship. It will arrive in Long Beach, California tomorrow. It will be in San Diego over the weekend and be sailing by the end of next week in San Diego. For what? To compete in a hopeless contest for the Cup if San Diego is permitted to defend with a catamaran. The Sail America concept of a match, for example, Your Honor, would be these, and I offer a few examples. Muhammad Ali, a heavyweight boxer, fighting Sugar Ray Leonard, a middleweight. It's a one-on-one match, but hardly fair and equal. The New York Mets versus the Little League champions of the world from Taiwan. One-on-one, but hardly a fair and equal match. Mark Spitz, the multiple gold medal swimming champion versus Dennis Conner, a non-swimmer of America's Cup fame. One-on-one, but hardly a fair and equal match. This is why, if Your Honor please, we are here today to prevent Sail America from rendering the Mercury Bay valid notice of challenge meaningless, from rendering the decision of this court meaningless, from rendering the judgment of this court meaningless, from rendering the right of Mercury Bay to sail a match for the America's Cup meaningless, from reducing the America's Cup competition to a farce.
I'm Ed Linderman. The Kiwis have arrived in San Diego. Let's go.
Within days of their arrival, the Kiwis had settled into a tough 6 days a week training program. Their aim was to raise their game to that demanded by an America's Cup challenge.
A Cup campaign's a battle on all fronts. The logistics, the resource, the effort, the energy, the money, the 2-year build-up means everything, and yet when you come to the starting line, it's the sailor and the boat only, and one man often making his call, then with the rest of the team sailing that race. And the contrast fascinates me because you couldn't do one without the other. It's only a yacht race, and yet it's the ultimate yacht race with the build-up that I can't contemplate in any other event.
We will blast out there as long as we can blast out there because we need to open up the gap to Lewis.
Now, apart from the...
I think we could put a high emphasis on that checklist again and doing long tests.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll keep going, high and wide.
Hammer down, is it? Hammer down. Off we go. 2 wind speed is now 11.4, up 1 knot.
Take care. Speed's 10.4, target's 10.2. Better speed now, good height.
Stand by to tack. Okay, wind on.
Breeze coming on you.
New Zealand was on site for the racing, and in the harbour, Dennis Connor was playing with his cats. Both were waiting for Judge Kiparik to decide their fate. The best bet on the long-awaited court decision was for a ruling going the Kiwis' way and a postponement of the racing until May of '89. The catamarans had shown their paces on the open sea off Point Loma, and no one relished the prospect of racing against a boat that was obviously so much faster. The judge, however, had a different idea. By the middle of July, the 64-strong Kiwi team had met all of their scheduled targets. On the water, the majority of that time had still been spent testing and recording the big boat's performance figures. The emphasis was about to change with the long-awaited ruling from the New York State Supreme Court. At 11 a.m. on the 25th, the decision was announced.
The comments, I gather there's quite a bit of comment there on the behaviour of defender and challenger. And from what I hear, there's a rap on the knuckles for them and a rap on the knuckles for us, so she's not happy. She's not decided that the catamaran is legal or illegal, as I understand it. So you've got to go back, and we might have to go back to court on the multi-hull issue.
The first analysis showed Judge Kiparik's decision was a total wild card. What it amounted to was race and decide on the legality of the cat later. The long struggle to get the San Diego Yacht Club into a monohull was over. In one stroke, the judge put the mismatch issue at the top of the agenda and guaranteed a return to court.
Yeah, I like that.
Michael Fay's reaction to this new challenge was unequivocal. He was still determined to fight for the principle.
You know, my position's got to be simple. I came and I challenged in the tradition of the Cup with an exciting boat for the Cup. I have never seen the defender since that day behave like a defender and behave like a sportsman. We will protest the mismatch forever. It is not sporting, it is not defending the Cup in terms of the deed of gift, and it is not right that the America's Cup become a mismatch. We will sail and protest. The judge has said race. Okay? She has not decided that the monohull against the multi-hull is legal or illegal. So on my calculation, we go to the line in 6 weeks. All right? In probably what will be a best of 3, so that means 2-0 to us. Okay? Now, if it was tough in Fremantle, if it was tough before, it's tough this time round because not any one of us has any bloody doubt about what should happen in terms of a multi-hull beating a mono-hull. So please, don't have any commitments, don't have any plans, don't have any expectations of when we go to bed and when we get out of bed, when we're working and when we're not working, because I think you'll all agree 6 weeks is a pretty short timetable, because we're not going to stop from here till there.
The task before the New Zealand crew was daunting. Dennis Connor now had both cats out on the water, trialling against each other, demonstrating their incredible straight-line speed. Analysis of their performance figures showed that fast as the big boat was, it was not in the same league as a 6,000-pound catamaran. The Kiwis' response to the catamaran defence was to confront it head-on. The hundreds of hours of evaluation now paid dividends in the search for optimum performance. Testing had showed that the big boat was capable of carrying even more sail, and a new mainsail, the largest ever racing mainsail, was built.
We're going to sheet mainly to this point.
Testing had also resulted in a new lighter mast being constructed. In it, 10 kilometres of wire connected over 160 strain gauges, keeping track of all the loads, some up to 45 tonnes.
She's in.
Finally, a new longer bowsprit had increased the overall length of the big boat by 10 feet. She now measured 132 feet overall and had increased her sail area by more than 10%.
Beautiful.
On the water, the emphasis now switched to full race training. The final cockpit crew was picked. David Barnes, 3 times World 470 champion, who also skippered KZ7 to victory in Sardinia, was named skipper. As navigator, there could be no one better than Richard Morris, the architect of the onboard computer systems. With Barnes was Peter Lester, World OK Dinghy champion and part of the winning New Zealand Admiral's Cup team as tactician and second helmsman. The big boat's targets had been set. From this point, they had to be applied to full race conditions, regardless of the likely outcome.
Because we knew the rules before we started here. We knew that the contest could end up like this for the sailors. I mean, it's going to go on after we've finished here. And so we were pretty, you're prepared for this sort of deal.
We've just been given the responsibility of learning how to sail this boat the best we can. And really, as far as we're all concerned, we've got to go out there and put on a good showing so that if the worst came to the worst, then really people can look at us and say, well, if they were racing against another boat of similar size and similar design, they would have beaten them because they're just so sharp, they're so professional, and they look really good.
Jive here, guys. Nick. Yep, coming up to it.
Thanks very much.
In the final weeks, the crew of KZ1 reached and often exceeded its targets. At the same time, new data was being collected on the cats and carefully analysed. Behind the scenes, there was no doubting the chances of the big boat. It was unanimous. It was simply a matter of mechanics.
Hanging onto the heads will carry a lot of load.
No, if I was a gambling man, I would, I would put all my dollars on the multi-hull. It's the physics of it explain that it's got to be faster. It has higher power-to-weight ratio than our boat.
Yeah, I think that's one of the real disappointments is that we've put all the effort into building and tuning this boat, and it won't ever get a real yacht race.
The public of San Diego, having had a good chance to look at the big boat, joined in the catamaran versus monohull debate.
Being a United States citizen, my heart is, I think, with the Americas group, but I really admire you guys a lot.
I think there's two different types of boats here completely, and it's like racing a stock car versus an Indy 500 car, and when you have that situation, it doesn't make for a race that's always equal.
Sounds like the deck's stacked against you. Is that accurate?
That's the way the papers are playing it.
I think that was a cheap shot, really, going in with the catamaran.
Although this cup looked like being a short, sharp affair, San Diego decked itself out for the coming battle. For America's Cup, read merchandising. Sail America simply hoped it was a dress rehearsal for the real thing in 1991, once this sneak attack, as Dennis Conner had described it, had been seen off. On a social level, one could be forgiven for thinking nothing out of the ordinary was happening. Certainly not the most bitter and fundamental fight in the history of the Cup. The international press rode into town in their hundreds. For them, this Cup had everything. Radical boats on the water and politics on the land. It was as good as 1983, the year of Bond's wing keel, and better than 1987 and the Glassgate affair. This series and the issues surrounding it were literally about the future and survival of the Cup. And America's Cup war of words was underway with a vengeance.
Cup, but I have a lot of sympathy for people out there who would perhaps be interested in following the event. I think they want to watch a sporting event. They want to see the real question answered. Can the Defender put a multi-hull boat, a catamaran, against the New Zealand monohull Challenger?
Well, I'm fed up with defending myself and the Stars and Stripes crew and team for having a fast boat. Maybe I'm confused. I spent my whole sailing career trying to come up with a fast boat. I thought that was the whole idea in sailboat racing.
We don't need an America's Cup to prove that a catamaran is faster than a monohull. Everybody knows that. And I think everybody in America knows that Dennis doesn't represent them when he goes out there and says, well, look, it doesn't have to be fair. There's nothing about fairness in the deed of gift.
Their plan now seems to be to set the world up for a lawsuit by complaining and whimpering about us being unfair or sailing too fast a boat. Well, you can see what I think about that.
For over a year, Fay had borne the burden of explaining the New Zealand case on the land. On the boat, as a member of the rail team, he enjoyed a much lower profile.
What do you mean? It's what?
Can't keep
It's
bailing
what?
out all your life.
I've got to lie down. I'm not even allowed to see the start because I have to lie down so you can see over me.
Sorry?
I'd see a better deal on the television screen.
Bring a mirror.
With 5 months of sailing behind them, the Kiwis were now a thoroughly efficient team. In campaigning the big boat, they had achieved something which had not been contemplated in over half a century. In other events around the world, they had proved they were winners. In San Diego, it looked as if their victory would be resolved in how they played the game. They were not prepared, however, to leave anything to chance, and the men from the land of the long white cloud asked the tribal elders to invoke the blessing of Tangaroa, the god of the sea, and Tapamatia, the god of the wind.
The crew's a lot tougher this time round than Fremantle, and I think I often feel if I could take it back to the beginning of the second round robin in Fremantle, this team with this experience, this hardened after all we've been through in just the last year, we would have beaten Connor in the last America's Cup. So I think our attitude right now, from what I know of America's Cups, shouldn't be changed, wouldn't be changed, couldn't be better.
The first race for the 27th America's Cup would be over a course laid down by the deed of gift, 20 miles to windward and 20 miles downwind return. Even before the starting gun, Stars and Stripes showed her potential, accelerating past KZ1. It was an indication of what was to come. KZ1 crossed the line 10 seconds ahead of Stars and Stripes, but then Dennis Conner wasted no time, accelerating past the big boat, placing himself between KZ1 and the windward mark. Within 20 minutes, Stars and Stripes was in a commanding position, and Dennis Conner had a problem: how to stay close enough to KZ1 and make it look like a match. For weeks, everyone had seen how fast the cat could go. Now they were going to be shown how slow it could be reasonably made to sail.
Is Dennis going as fast as he can? Jim, I alternate. Sometimes I think Dennis Conner is sailing very fast. Right now, he's sailing very slow.
Right now, he's
the boat is straight into the wind. The jib is luffing. The mainsail's in the middle of the boat, and he's almost stopped dead. You know, if anybody's trying to wonder whether he's sandbagging or not, take it from me. He's slowing the boat down. He's going slower than he possibly could. Unfortunately, we missed one.
At the windward mark, Stars and Stripes was 9 minutes ahead of the big boat. The race was as good as over. 20 miles on, Stars and Stripes crossed the line 18 minutes ahead of KZ1. Most experts reckoned a truer margin for that course and wind speed should have been closer to 1 hour.
17:50 and counting.
KZ1 sailed the course in a record-breaking time for a monohull.
She's over the line now. 17:55 was the time.
Race 1 had proved what everyone with the exception of the San Diego Yacht Club had been predicting, and the first round of the mismatch was over.
Birthday present.
Is it your birthday?
We knew what that catamaran could do, so we didn't come off the water surprised by what happened. And we went out this morning knowing the performance of that catamaran. We went out enthusiastically, and we'll do the same thing on Friday and on Sunday.
We sailed our boat to full potential around the course, and I think the boat was certainly sailed as fast around the course as you'd ever expect to see it. I would like to say that we didn't feel that Stars and Stripes was sailed anywhere near her potential. We felt that they just paced us around the course most of the way. And it was disappointing for us to see a boat which is potentially a lot faster than ours, which was not really sailed very well. And I think if that is the best that Dennis can do, then I think it's a disappointment for him to be defending in the America's Cup, because I feel the boat could have gone a lot better than what it did.
Can you answer that, Dennis?
No, I guess when he's won 4 America's Cup, he can then tell me how to do it.
Okay, questions now.
One cheap shot was not enough for Dennis Conner. In full flight, he continued.
I'm sailing a cat. Somebody else is sailing a dog.
The second of the 3 scheduled races was also to be over a deed of gift course. It was a 39-mile triangle with the first leg to windward. The catamaran had a very superior speed advantage on both reaching legs. Surprisingly, Stars and Stripes and KZ1 engaged in a tacking duel, but the big boat gained on the cat all the time. By throwing a dummy tack, David Barnes had Dennis Conner stopped dead in the water, an embarrassing situation for an experienced sailor. After that, Conner lost interest in pretending to race a match, and taking advantage of the increasing wind, powered up the cat and used its massive speed advantage to take a commanding lead. For 5 months, the big boat had been racing against herself and her own target speeds, and here she was doing the same. The real contest was the desire of her crew to achieve what they had proved they were capable of doing, sailing the largest, fastest monohull built in 50 years with skill and determination. Rounding the final mark, they were 12 minutes down on the cat, yet in a way it was irrelevant. These 2 boats, each the most technologically advanced yachts of their type, may as well have been racing on different oceans. Stars and Stripes crossed the line 22 minutes ahead of New Zealand. Dennis Conner had retained the cup. The challenge had been repulsed, at least on the water. When the big boat crossed the line, the crew's efforts were acknowledged by the waiting spectator fleet. In one way, they'd achieved their aim, sailing the 2 courses faster than any monohulled yacht in history. In the late afternoon of the 9th of September, New Zealand was towed into her dock for the last time. Her racing life was over. There was, however, one job left for the crew.
Do you feel disappointed, happy, overjoyed?
Well, I think you can only, in a circumstance like that, you can only put a test in front of yourself and your crew and your boat. And I think they came through today with flying colours.
Are you going to go home, Dad?
No.
Strangely enough, in the New Zealand compound, there was no sense of defeat. An outside observer could have been forgiven for thinking the big boat and her crew had, at the end of the day, won.
Right now we're going to put the boat up in its cradle and leave it for the night while we go and have a beer.
Michael Fay and his crew went to San Diego with a challenge for a race with a new boat and what he saw as a new and exciting future for the Cup. They expected nothing more than integrity, sportsmanship and a fair match. Few think they received that, but from their side there were no regrets about a job well done.
I've seen one guy grow bloody feet this year. He's taken a lot of heat. He's almost as big as the champagne bottle.
Later that evening, Alan Bond, who has more America's Cup campaigns under his belt than any other challenger, summed up what many felt about the events surrounding the 27th defence of the Cup.
Well, it really wasn't an America's Cup today. It was a great disappointment to the rest of the world watching, the great mismatch and the lack of sportsmanship that was out there.
If you were the judge, how would you rule in Michael Fay's lawsuit?
Well, I would have to rule that there was not a proper America's Cup match, and I'd have to return the Cup to New Zealand.
7 months before the mismatch in San Diego, I came to this harbour to see the big boat sail for the first time. For me, it was a boyhood dream come true, a huge yacht aimed at the sport's most sought-after trophy. A yacht in the tradition of those I'd learned about long before I knew about any other sport. A lean, sleek vessel that deserved a match. A challenge of flair that should have been met on equal terms. Too late we know that dreams are seldom realised, and the final act of this drama will be fought out miles away in a New York courtroom. Whatever the outcome in that court, the fact that Michael Fay had the courage to build this magnificent big boat has changed the face of the America's Cup forever. Already a new class of lightweight boats, bigger than the 12 metres which held sway for 30 years, has been planned. They are the direct descendants of New Zealand, the boat which fired imaginations and will keep the Cup alive for many years, the result of the efforts of Fay and his crew, who, like so many before them, have discovered the powerful addiction of yachting's holy grail.
It wasn't a question for me of why I challenged. I think I just picked up something that was there and started to bounce the ball along. It's more for me now, and I think also for David Rishwaite, that we're not going to stop bouncing the ball until we put it in the net. And if we have to cross over that court time and time again and go up and down it as many times as we have to, that ball, as far as we're concerned, is going in that net.
Coming on a touchdown. Look at him. Okay, go. Okay, trimming up for 10.
Moving slow, looking for a 9-9 target.
On the 28th of March 1989, Judge Carmen Siparik of the New York State Supreme Court ruled that to permit a race between a monohull and a multi-hull would be to countenance a mismatch. San Diego's defense of the America's Cup in a catamaran clearly deviated from the intent of the donor. And San Diego, barely paying lip service to the significance of the competition, thus violated the spirit of the deed. San Diego was duly disqualified and ordered to forfeit the America's Cup to the Mercury Bay Boating Club. Michael Fay's New Zealand challenge had been vindicated. Contrarily, San Diego lodged notice of their intent to appeal Judge Siparik's decision.